all. And I did hear that very distinct invitation to an annual spring luncheon here, and I appreciate that. I've started a tradition in Fairbanks. I think it's been now, it's either 8 years, might be 9 years, where we've done an annual spring lunch up there, and it's a good excuse to get back home up to Fairbanks. And seems like a good excuse to come down here to Homer. So we'll certainly be looking to that. But Monty, I thank you and appreciate the opportunity to be with you. It's my favorite time of year when the daylight is coming on. It's spring. People are kind of coming out from underneath the snow berms out there, and just things are optimistic in Alaska, and I think we tend to feel that every year just about this time. Back in Washington, D.C., this next week will be the 100th anniversary of the Cherry Blossom Festival. Cherry blossoms bloomed 3 weeks ago. So it's just further indication that in Washington, D.C., we can't seem to get anything right. We're not even the festivals. The buds are going to bloom when they darn well feel like blooming. But it is that annual ritual of spring back on the East Coast, that and you know, the groundhog coming out in Pennsylvania. But here in Alaska, the harbingers of spring are just a little bit different. When I was up in Fairbanks, they were all excited because the geese are starting to come back in. The Ice Classic tickets are now on sale. Every year I say, this is how I'm going to, you know, fund the kids' college education. Hasn't worked yet, but every year hope springs eternal, and this year is no different. And I come down here to Homer, and I'm just kind of flipping through the chamber brochure there, and your signs of spring, the Shorebird Festival coming up. That's unique to the region. In just about every community that I'm going to, they're all advertising their own spring cleanup day as the piles of snow recede and we find all the lost things that have been missing for a while. But I love coming home to Alaska because here we have our bear beware signs. Now, I could go to Ohio or Vermont, and I can tell you I would go to a chamber lunch and nowhere would they have the reminders to us all about your garbage cans and your fish carcasses and what we do when the bears start to wake up in the spring. So anyway, it's always a good reminder to know that you're truly at home. I thought I was going to see a lot more snow when I came here, because I understand that you all have had almost a record year. 16 feet of snow, that's pretty respectable, though, for any community. So I applaud you on that. Anchorage is really annoyed because they're like less than 3 inches from their record. And they're so annoyed that it's been this long, snowy winter. And it's like, by gosh, if we're going to go this far, give us the final 3 inches, and it won't snow. So you can't win for losing. But we're actually going to be having an interagency roundtable tomorrow in Anchorage that's focused on whether or not we're prepared for what many believe is going to be a pretty interesting and perhaps challenging breakup. We're going to have the Weather Service, the NOAA folks. As you know, we can have some pretty challenging times in parts of our state. So we're going to see what the forecast might be, and as breakup is the spring tradition, the summer tradition, as we also know, is the coming of the annual fire season. I got a little bit of an update from the folks at BLM within the fire service agencies. They say that here in Alaska it's going to be a normal fire season, but they're predicting that here in the southwestern part of the peninsula that it's going to be an above average fire season. What that really means, I think, remains to be seen, but I think it's something that we're always on the aware, always on the alert. We deal with the spruce bark beetle kill and recognize the challenges that presents to us. But a couple things that I would like to talk about today, and then hopefully, Monty, we've got time for questions, because I think that's always much more interesting. But one touch on a few things within your community and then kind of take it to a 30,000-foot level in Washington, D.C. First of all, the things in the community. There are towns that I visit in Alaska that make me feel good because the communities are healthy, energetic, enterprising communities, and you should be proud that Homer clearly falls into that category. When I came in this morning, I had an opportunity to sit down with some of you over at the USDA offices talking about what Homer as a community and the region here is doing when it comes to food and sustainability with your resources, using some pretty basic technology with these high tunnels, and the opportunities that you have to do more as a region to not only feed yourself and your families, but to generate a level of income and do so in a way that, not rocket science here, but really good, strong, fundamental stuff. And Rita Jo over here gave me a quick PowerPoint presentation on what's going on with the local peony growers and the fact that we are building a market that is now a niche market that allows for jobs and opportunities, not only to help us here for export to the lower 48, but potentially to a world market. And when you think about what it is that we can do up here, you have to feel pretty proud of some of the entrepreneurial spirit that comes out of what others would say, that's a challenge just too deep, too far. You're too far away geographically, it's too cold, it's too wet, it's too this, it's too that. We pull it together and make great things happen. So I applaud that. I also just came from the Seldovia Village Tribe, looking at the wellness center over there. Incredible facility in this region in terms of how we provide for one another. Halibut. Can't come to Homer and not talk about halibut. Some would say, oh my gosh, don't talk about halibut. That gets far too political. You know, the fact of the matter is if I don't talk about it, you're going to talk about it, so we may as well talk about halibut. And that's a good thing, because I think it's fair to say that nearly every aspect of halibut management is under review right now, and I think that makes sense. We've got to understand what's going on with declining growth rates with this resource. We've got to keep working to refine a management program that will maintain sustainable halibut fisheries. You know, when we're talking about sustainable food, we've got to make sure that out there in the oceans, out in our waters, we've got sustainable fisheries. And as part of that effort, we got the North Pacific Fishery Management Council. They're actively reviewing the halibut bycatch levels in the Gulf groundfish fisheries. NIMS is drafting regulations to implement council recommendations to restructure the groundfish observer program. Of course, the council just took a much closer look at the catch sharing plan just this past weekend, and I think it's important to let you know, I clearly recognize the disappointment, the anxiety, that delay after delay in developing a long-range management program for the halibut has caused. I think we recognize that uncertainty makes it as difficult as anything else. But I am glad that NAMS and the Council have decided to better evaluate what we're dealing with here. The CSP, I think we recognize, could have resulted in a one-fish bag limit when we know that the charter section hasn't exceeded their limit under the current management program, even under the two-fish limit. So I think the additional review that is ongoing, the updated analysis, is warranted so that we really understand the effects of the proposed program relative to what we have in place today. I'm sure that it's been discussed here, but for those of you that are not aware of what the Council adopted on, I guess it was Monday, it was the 2nd of April, some significant proposals, and I think it's important to also recognize that they were adopted unanimously. But the annual review and the recommendations and the acknowledgement that there is a flexibility, I think, in this review is going to be important to make sure that we've got available information and experience in each year. So we're abandoning the, I guess, the less flexible process that was out there, the automated fixed matrix that had been in play. I think when we recognize you've got some accommodation because you have an annual review that, again, looks to the actual facts on the ground, I think is going to be important for recommending subsequent measures. Improved data, recognizing that we'll have a transition of the official data source for the charter harvest estimates from what was the survey estimates to now the vessel logbooks. I think that this will probably provide for more timely data, and I think that will be an important aspect as well. You've got the sector level accountability, which again is another aspect of it, and then a review of the allocations, re-examining what the appropriate percentages might be. It's my understanding that the council is going to take this analysis, consider it, and we'll learn more in their October meeting this year. They would then have the option to take final action to recommend a revised halibut CSP to the Secretary of Commerce. But given that timeline, then, it's my understanding that NIMS wouldn't have new regulations in effect for the start of the 2013 season. So the guideline harvest levels would be in place for 2013. So it allows for a little more certainty there. But again, this was an issue that when you think of those matters that come before a community like yours that bring about angst, stress, tension, probably all-out warfare, for all I know, it is important to try to make sure that there is a process that does allow for a level of flexibility, does allow for accurate and timely data, does allow for that input that is so critical and so necessary. So that's kind of where we are with halibut as I know it today. I guess down in Southeast, their catch limits are up a little bit. Charter anglers are going to be operating under a less restrictive limit that includes an opportunity for charter clients to take a larger fish. I think that's some good news because a 37-inch limit in place last year didn't provide for that opportunity. We heard very, very clearly how disruptive that was. In South Central, the commercial halibut catch limits are down 17%. They're down 30% for areas to the west. I think what is clear is that we need to have a better understanding here as to the science and to the turn around these declining trends. I know that the Council and the IPHC have a workshop coming up. They're going to be looking more into some of these issues to the halibut stock assessment. Although I think it's probably going to take more than one meeting to resolve that, but I do think that it is a step there in the right direction. So moving off halibut, let's go up into the air. Let's go 30,000 feet. Let's talk a little bit about what is going on in Washington, D.C. and how that might actually have implications down here on the ground in Homer and South Central. We're tackling some pretty tough stuff. Or I hope we're tackling some pretty tough stuff. We're looking at a debt of $15 trillion, rising deficit. The debt itself, the public debt, translates to just a little less than $50,000 per person. When I'm in the high schools and the middle schools talking with the kids, I ask the kids, "You got $48,000 in your pocket?" And they look at me like, you know, who's this crazy lady? I said, each and every one of you. each and every one of you, not just those over 18, not just those that voted for me. Everybody in this country is, when you break the debt down, it's a pretty astounding figure. Unemployment rate, it's been getting a little bit better, but the fact of the matter is we still, on a national average, we're still over 8%. That's nothing to write home about. The prices of fuel that we are paying all over the country, national average now is just a little bit below $4. I think most of you in this community would say, I'd be happy with $4. We've been sitting here at $4.50 for so long, give me a break. I get kind of a weekly update on what prices are doing around the state, where we're seeing those bumps up. Kotzebue, they're sitting at over $7 a gallon for unleaded. Our communities are hurting. And it's not just the price at the pump, it's what we pay for our utilities. And this it's been a long winter, but the fact of the matter is it's not just limited to long, dark winters. Our energy costs in this state are crushing many of our communities, many of our families. The costs are simply not sustainable. Other things that are not sustainable, we're worried about the long-term sustainability of Medicare, of Social Security. These programs and other mandatory spending programs are projected to consume 58% of all federal spending by the year 2021. 2021 is not too many years away. But that mandatory spending side of the ledger, where the Congress really doesn't have any say-so in terms of how much we're going to put in to Medicare, how much we're going to put into Medicaid. That's kind of off the table. Those are decisions that are already made. That's mandatory spending. We absolutely have to fund that. Over 58% of our budget. Think about what that does to the discretionary side. When we're talking about getting increased funding for USDA for some of the projects that we were talking about this morning, that discretionary side of the budget is getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. That's going to have an impact to all of us here. Now, you might say, okay, well, boy, you've got a lot that is on your plate, a lot of weighty issues in front of you. How are you coming with them? And I wish that I could stand here before you today and tell you, don't worry. Your Social Security is fine, your Medicare is fine, we're going to deal with the long-term debt, we're going to solve all the problems of the world. Right now, what is going on in Washington, D.C., in my view, is more messaging than government. The House has actually taken some serious votes on some domestic policy issues, and that's good. But it comes over to the Senate, and either it dies or it just doesn't ever even get presented for an opportunity for a vote. The modern discourse that you are seeing in the Senate today, supposedly the world's greatest debating institution, boils down to reading some canned talking points to a largely empty Senate floor. It involves taking votes on propositions that may have no chance of passage, but they are put out there solely for political reasons. And it's, in my view, again, I think it's designed to increase the polarization, because that's what the experts say wins elections. That's how you're going to win an election. Well, I don't think most of you care about the winning. What you care about is the governing. What you care about is policies that are made, whether it's a national energy policy that is going to work to make sure that we're reducing our emissions so that we're good environmental stewards, while at the same time we've got the ability to power our country in a good and responsible way. I think you want to know that we're making policy decisions that are actually going to reduce your health care costs and increase your access to health care. It doesn't make a bit of difference to you whether or not we have positioned ourselves so that, you know, we're taking a vote so that I can say in my campaign, or I can say against my opponent, that you oppose health care or you support health care. Why don't we just figure it out? Well, I wish that I could tell you that the collective wisdom in your governing bodies right now was that we are here to govern. But right now it's about elections. And I say that with a little bit of frustration. No, excuse me. I say that with a lot of frustration. Because as lovely as a city like Washington, D.C. is in the spring with the cherry blossoms blooming, that's not my home. My home is here. I want to be here. But my job is there. I have to vote there. And as long as I'm working to govern, I'm okay not being home here. Because I feel like we're making some headway. Right now, I'm not convinced we're making headway. And I don't mean to kind of vent and rant here, but it is important for you to understand that on the political scene right now, I don't think that your Congress is doing you any favors. And I have to include myself in that because I am one of them. And it's my responsibility to try to change this dynamic, to try to make sure that we are governing, that we are trying to come into the middle so that we don't have the polarization and we're not just taking votes on the wedge issue of the day. There was discussion this morning on KBBI about the vote on contraception. That was an amendment on a transportation highway reauthorization bill. It was not designed to bring out the debate, pros or cons on contraception. It was designed because it was going to force a vote on an issue and put people on one side or another. It had nothing to do with transportation. A little bit of a mess. Don't give up hope, though. I haven't given up hope. I believe that we are at that point where we were talking at our table over there about health care. What's going to happen with health care? We have such issues before us that we can only hide behind the election for so long. And it catches up. Healthcare is a perfect example of that. The courts are deciding now. In fact, the courts have probably already decided what the outcome of the health care law is going to be. We won't learn that until June. If the court decides that this individual mandate is unconstitutional and it's thrown out, that doesn't mean that we in the Congress are done. That means that we really need to kick it into high gear. That means that we really need to be advancing those measures that will work to reduce our health care costs. I think some of the things that we need to do right away, we need to make sure that the popular things that everybody agreed on in that bill are reinstated. If you've got a pre-existing condition, you should not be shut out by your insurance company. If you've got a child that is under 26 years old, you've got to be able to continue on that policy. But there's so much more that we have to do. I think we need to have meaningful tort reform as part of health care reform. I think, particularly in a state like Alaska where our population is limited, I think you need to be able to enter into pooling agreements to reduce the cost. I think you need to be able to purchase across state lines. I think we need to look at how we pay for services. We've got a system right now that pays you based on its fee for service. For this particular service, there is this charge. We need to reform that model. It's not easy. None of this is easy. If it was easy, we would have done it a long time ago. But it's our responsibility to do so. One more issue, and then I'd like to kick it open for questions. And this is as it relates to our justice system. In the news in the past several weeks, actually past month or so, has been this report that came out from the Ted Stevens investigation. As you all know, that report came out and it showed evidence of really striking prosecutorial misconduct in the Stevens case. That was why the Attorney General dismissed that verdict. But Ted had said that he believed that once this investigation was concluded, it would be demonstrated the extent of the misconduct. I don't think he had any idea the extent of the misconduct that we are seeing revealed in this report. When the judge says that because of this ill-gotten verdict, not only did Ted Stevens lose his election, but it tipped the balance of power in the United States Senate. This is not an inconsequential thing. And I think I look at what happened within the Department of Justice, a justice who by virtue of their name is to deliver justice. It's not to deliver convictions, it's to deliver justice. They failed in that with Ted Stevens. And Ted is no longer around to be vindicated by this. I have introduced legislation that will make sure that nobody will have to go through what Senator Ted Stevens did. It shouldn't make any difference whether you're a United States Senator or whether you're a small placer miner that's fighting the federal government over your claim on the land here. It shouldn't make any difference how wealthy you are or how good of a defense team you can put together. The Department of Justice should be there for justice. And unfortunately, they were not. So I've introduced legislation that would ensure that if you've got material evidence, it has to be turned over. That's what the law requires already. But in the Stevens case, apparently the lawyers weren't told, the prosecutors weren't told to follow the law. Now, I'm trained in the law, I practiced. I didn't think I had to be told to follow the law. I thought it was assumed that we do this. And the judge, your mayor, he knows. So we're trying to right the wrong that we saw imposed on Senator Stevens. And if there's any legacy from this, it will be that no American, regardless of your status or your stature, would have to be in a situation where our Department of Justice fails to follow that path to justice. So it is an effort that is ongoing. It is one that I intend to carry. We've actually got a rally going on in Anchorage at the end of the day, so I'll be leaving here after my visit to the high school to go and just again make the point that it's not just about Alaskans for justice. It needs to be about Americans for justice and how we make sure that our systems work for all of us. With that, let's throw it out for whatever questions you might have until Monty tells me my time is up. All the way in the back.
Thank you very much. About 15 years ago, I gave a presentation to your father and Uncle Ted. A couple of people in the room here about developing a polar expedition class vessel that we could operate in Alaska to support the Arctic Council, which has such a beautiful mission. I'd love to do a little presentation on what's going on with the future Eagle report in western coastal Alaska, as well as how Homer could possibly integrate with the Arctic Council and promote cooperation, coordination, and I need to put my glasses on. Interaction. To promote cooperation, coordination, and interaction among Arctic states. If we create an Arctic Council vessel that would help support economically and socially the Arctic nations and give a platform for our own students to be able to go to other countries and see what's going on in the Arctic Circle, so to speak. What a great avenue for advancing our ocean sciences, our physical sciences, our atmospheric sciences, and support the native culture that I know you're so far very supportive of. So please talk about the Arctic Council.
Well, you're touching on a subject that is near and dear to my heart. I have served as the U.S. representative on the Arctic Parliamentarian Council since I came to the Senate. And it's a role that I really like because it allows for a level of engagement with the other Arctic nations that covers the gamut, whether it's healthcare issues as they relate to our indigenous peoples, whether it is resource issues, whether it's commerce. It's an incredible forum. Of course, the Arctic Council is that premier body, and I have been privileged to attend the meeting in Greenland last May with Secretary Clinton, Secretary Salazar, and I was the U.S. Representative from the Congress. We recognize that we've got an incredible role to play in the Arctic. We can and should be kind of the lead on this in making sure that the Arctic is an area not of conflict for resource or argument over security issues, but an area of cooperation. Think about what they've done down in Antarctica as an area of cooperation. We've got that opportunity up north, but we've got to assume the responsibility. We are just now getting the message out to the rest of the country that we are an Arctic nation. When Hillary Clinton said in Greenland, we are an Arctic nation, it was just, I wanted to go up and put my arms around her. Because she was saying what we've been saying for a long while, but others haven't recognized it. And it's so critical to our leadership role. We're coming into it, but it's still a struggle. You talk about the vessels and the opportunity there. We've got to get the commitment to having those assets that will allow us to assume that role as an Arctic leader. Right now, we are down and out when it comes to our ice-breaking capacity. The Polar Sea is going to be decommissioned. The Polar Star is undergoing a little bit of rehab here, and she's not going to be out in the water until 2014. The Healy has done a phenomenal job. We saw her efforts this winter trying to bring the Renda into Nome, but our reality is we don't have a polar-class icebreaker. We've got money in the budget, $8 million. What does $8 million buy? I told the legislature, it doesn't even buy you a porthole. We have got to get the commitment to the resources. And it is something that we're pushing on. We've gotten the attention. We've got the attention of the military leaders. They're with us on it. We need to have more focus on it. I don't know that we're going to be able to make it happen from the perspective of a sharing arrangement. But, you know, maybe that's how we start. Maybe we say, well, okay, if it's going to be that expensive for us to build one on our own, what can we do from a more collaborative perspective? And I think that's where you're going with it. The Arctic should get us all excited. As a coastal community, Homer will have a role to play. It is that next generation of frontier exploration that I think we've got up north, and this community can be a part of that.
In Antarctica, they have an international